Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we are painting a watercolor honeybee directly in Procreate. As always, the color palette is entirely free. Just tap on the link in the video description and you can download and install it. For the honeybee itself, we're using my paid set of watercolor illustration brushes, but if you want to change up the style, feel free to use any other brushes that you'd like. For the lettering, we're using my furry ink brush from my Font Lovers Procreate brush set, but once again, feel free to use any lettering brushes that you'd like. Just a heads up, this is more of an intermediate tutorial, so if the pace feels a little too fast, I would encourage you to check out my free Procreate for Beginners course or some of my past free tutorials here on YouTube. All right, that said, I'm going to create a brand new document that's 1500 pixels by 1500 pixels at 300 DPI, and then we'll get started. Okay, so first we're going to lay down some foundations just to get everything sketched out and roughed out, and then we'll put in all of our details and fill everything out afterwards. So part of the sketching phase is we're going to need to turn on our symmetry settings, so whatever's on one side is repeated on the other side since we have a symmetrical insect here. So I'm first going to turn on my symmetry settings by tapping the wrench up here, going to Canvas, turn on Drawing Guide, hit Edit Drawing Guide. Down here, tap on Symmetry. Under Options, just make sure Vertical and Assisted Drawing are toggled on. I'm going to make this a little darker so you can see it better on screen, and then hit done. Okay, so now whatever I draw on one side will repeat on the other side. So that's exactly what we want. For this, I am using my sketching pencil, which is part of that watercolor illustration brush set. I'll leave a link in the video description to that. Okay, so for the body, it's going to be kind of fat, and we're just going to do that. So that's the shape that you want to go for the main structure of the bee's body. So now what we want to do, I'm going to create a brand new layer above it. So now you can see that the assisted layer, this one's going to be symmetrical. So whatever we draw on this one, it's always going to be repeated on both sides. But for layer 2, this one right here doesn't have assisted. So we're going to put in all of our reference marks here. So when we draw in the symmetrical components, we can just use that as a guide. Hopefully that makes sense. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. So the first thing I want to do on this layer 2 is find the halfway point between these two. I'm going to roughly establish that around here feels like the center to me. All right, so once you have your center, now we're going to find the center between the top and our new center point. So that I'm going to say is like right here. Now I can draw in the head portion. So I'm going to come back to my symmetrical layer right here, and we're going to establish the head of the bee. So the head of the bee is going to come like right around here. So it follows this outlined path that we first had. So this is the head of the bee. And now I can draw in its little eyes. So these are going to be like right here. So I can rough those in. And then its antenna is going to come right here. So we'll do that. And then the top of it's going to be a little more curved. So we'll just curve that a little bit. Remember, this is your sketch layer. We're going to finalize everything on a different layer later, but this will help us really establish everything that we've got going on. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to put a center point, let me go back to my non-symmetrical layer, between these two. So I'm gonna say it's like right here. And for the second segment of the body, it's going to be skinnier than this. So I'm going to make it just a little bit less than this, but this helps me to judge that size. So I'm gonna come back to my symmetrical layer. So this isn't going to come quite to the edge, so it's gonna come more like to this edge. So if I follow this line down right here, that's going to give me a width to aim for. So it's going to start right here. He doesn't have much of a neck, if you want to think of it that way. And then it's going to come to this line like we talked about. So the next one is going to be this little bit of extra and then just a little bit further this time. So this one's going to be kind of a big segment, and it's going to follow the same edge as we had right there. So now we can do his butt. So this is going to come, it's going to come back to the edge here. So we're going to start like right here and then follow that curvature down. And maybe we'll make him just a little less pointy at the very bottom. So we got our bee body, and I like just erasing this part that way it's not distracting to me. So I can just go in here with the eraser and erase that way. And now I also want to rough in the detail area of this bee. So I know that he's going to have hair that comes up like this, and then this whole top triangle is going to come in like this. So just having an idea of all this. And then he's also going to have hair that kind of comes up like this. So this whole area is shaded in. And then it comes all the way down into this entire segment is going to be all hair. So I'm giving myself more reference. And it's going to come even down into this segment just a little bit. All right. And then this whole segment's going to be outlined with hair. So we can just bring it all the way down, but it's just going to follow the contour of this segment. And then his butt area actually has quite a bit of detail when it comes to hair. He's going to have like a line of hair that comes down like this. And then there's like an opening here and then another opening right beneath it. So imagine that all of this is hair. So now we have a better idea of what our bee looks like. Actually, I'm going to make this end a little sooner. Make that a little more blunt right there. Next thing are the legs. So the first pair of legs is going to come off from like his cheek right here, and it's just going to come up and extend out just like that. And then the next one's going to be from like where this joint is. It's going to come out and then down. Down again, and then here. And then his last one's going to start like kind of in the middle of this fat one right here. So we'll draw one segment out and then down again. This one gets pretty long. And he's got like pinchers down here. So these legs have these joints like that. And then this one is just like hair-covered leg, very small joints. Okay, so now we can put in the wings. So for the wing, this is what I do. I establish the size of my bee, and I usually do this with my hand. So this is the size of my bee, and then I go to the middle part, and then I just mark a line with my finger. So now I know that this is how far my wings are going to expand. It's going to start like right underneath the cheek right here and come up. And I'm going to draw another segment that kind of comes up like this, and that makes it a little easier for me. Remember, this is a sketch layer, so give yourself plenty of freedom to redraw if it's not looking the way you want it to. So my end point is going to end up like right here, right in the middle of this big section right there. So that's kind of where I'm aiming as I finish it. I did look at a bunch of bee reference photos before I started this, so feel free to do that. If you feel lost at all while you're sketching things in, it's a really good idea. So that helped me a lot with designing this. So I'm going to do a line that goes from like where this leg connects, and it's going to curve down to like here. So we'll do like this. You can really have the freedom to do whatever you want right here. This is an illustration, remember? So your wing design, do whatever you want. We have the main structure of our bee. So now we get to do the fun part, which is drawing everything in and finalizing it and painting it the way that we want it. So what I'm going to do is reduce the opacity. We can actually just either turn off or remove our guidelines from layer 2. Our layer 1 is our sketch layer. So I'm going to reduce the opacity of it so we can still see it well, but everything we're doing is going to be dark and final on top of it. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. And this is going to be called Outline. This one I like using my round liner brush for. It's just a little more darker and defined. And now we can come in and draw all of our areas. And I like turning the symmetry on for this. And you actually don't have to go back to the wrench. All you have to do is tap on the layer thumbnail and hit Drawing Assist. And now it'll say Assisted right here. It takes on whatever your previous symmetry settings were. So now whatever we draw on one side gets repeated on the other. I'm going to reduce the size of this to 8%. Let's see what that looks like. Looks pretty good. So it's going to be dark and defined. Actually, I'm going to come down to 6%. Okay, so I'm going to start with the eyes first. I still want it to feel a little bit sketchy, but I want it to look more finished than like a sketch. So that's why I'm using my round liner brush here. And then I can draw in the antenna. I'm going to come back through after, because you can see that things get like crazy repeated right along the symmetry line. So I'm going to come back in later. And the only reason this looks pixelated right now is because I'm super zoomed into it. When I'm zoomed out at regular viewing, which is when you see your entire artboard on the screen, it's not pixelated then. A lot of people think that things are pixelated because they can see the pixels when they're super up close. You're always going to see pixels super up close because it's a pixel-based program. So you always want to view your artwork at 100%. And if it looks pixelated when you're at 100%, then you have a problem. Okay, so we can preview what we've got so far just by turning your sketch layer on and off. So that's looking pretty good. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is actually erase these edges, because I only want them to be filled with yellow. I don't want that dark outline in those areas. It's the one part of the body that is just going to be yellow. All right, I've got my outline layer still selected. We can add in the legs now. All right, and then the next part has a little bit of hair in these segments. So I'm just going to put some hair. I'm not going to actually outline these. I like putting the wings on their own layer just because sometimes I have to redraw them a few times. It makes it easier to not have them intersecting with my final artwork of the body now that I'm happy with the body. So I'm just going to create a brand new layer. I'll label these ones wings, and I'm going to apply the symmetry again. So tap on the layer thumbnail, hit drawing assist, and now I've got the symmetry. So now I'm going to carefully outline this. Okay, let's turn off our sketch layer. Those look like pretty good wings. So now we just get to paint it in. So I'm going to create a brand new layer underneath the outline layer. So just select whatever layer is underneath outline, create a brand new layer above it, and now it'll be right underneath the outline layer. And this one's going to be my yellow paint. So I'm going to grab my yellow right here. And you can see we've only used 2 colors for this whole project, which is probably a record. I've got my heavy paint round brush selected, and I'm going to apply the symmetry once again to this layer. So tap on the layer thumbnail and hit drawing assist. And if you've seen my past tutorials using these brushes, you know that I like keeping them all down at the same time, like filling this whole shape in without lifting up my stylus. That way I don't get the wet on dry technique look. I can do like the segment because I've got hair right here, so I can lift it up and move. But for the most part, I draw everything in one stroke before lifting up the stylus. Okay, and then for the legs, there's just a few joints that are going to have yellow. Okay, let's turn off the sketch layer and see how that looks. And that's looking like a pretty good bee. So I want to add in just a little bit more depth by pulling up some of this yellow in some areas to create highlights on the body. So I'm going to use layer masking for this. If you're unfamiliar with layer masking, I'll leave a link on screen and in the video description to my layer masking video. So what I'm going to do is just tap on the layer thumbnail, hit mask. I'm going to be using black for my mask, and I'm going to be using my dense wash brush for this. And I've got black selected because I am removing areas or hiding them. So I'm just going to lightly brush around the head part so the outline is a little bit darker. So I'm creating that highlight right on his head. and that just gives the whole bee a little bit more dimension. So if you pick up your stylus and put it back down, it'll make it even more obvious. Like that's too much, I think. So I'm gonna go back to what I had. And then the same thing for his body. I'm just gonna pull up a little bit of color. This is kind of equivalent to if this paint were wet watercolor, and you brought in a paper towel to lift up some of the color in those areas. So that's what we're doing right here. And then same thing with some of these leg joints. I'm gonna reduce the size of this brush because these are smaller areas. Okay, and I mentioned before that I was going to come back over these areas that look really symmetrical with the hair and add in some extra hair just to make it more dense. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're basically done. So I'm going to create a brand new layer up at the very top. I'm going to go back to my black color and then come to, I think I'm going to go to my sketching pencil because this is hair, so I'm going to introduce a different texture now because we drew all of our hair before with the round liner brush, so sketching pencil would be nice to switch it up a little bit. So my brush size is 4%. Let's see how that looks. And I don't have symmetry turned on for this, so I'm going to be doing this for a little bit, but it's going to really help make this nice and dense through here, and it's going to look less symmetrical and more organic since this is a living creature. Okay, and I've decided I want to make the wings just a little bit sketchier. They're super clean and I like all the texture I've got going on in the body, so I just want to mimic that just a little bit. So I'm going to create a brand new layer and I'm just going to outline the wings with my sketching pencil to darken them up in some of these areas. And I'm keeping the symmetry off, that way it looks a little different on each side. So our bee is all done. If you want to label him, you can add in a little bit of lettering now. So I'm going to turn off my guideline. I definitely don't need that anymore. And I'm going to create a brand new layer up the very top, label this one lettering. I'm going to go to my Font Lovers Procreate brush set. I'm going to grab my furry ink brush because it seemed like the best brush for this very furry bee, and then just label it. So that's how to create a watercolor honeybee entirely in Procreate. Once again, links to everything mentioned within this tutorial are right in the video description, including the free color palette, the watercolor brush set, and my Font Lovers lettering brush set. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can be notified of new tutorials just like this one in the future. For more Procreate tutorials and freebies, head on over to my site, every-tuesday.com. You can also find me over on Instagram. My handle is everytuesday. If you try this out and post it there, I would love it if you tag me. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next week.